Thank you very much. Good afternoon. So I think Alvin's saved me the introductory aspect of this, so bravo. Okay, so so we'll be covering a brief overview of UCL's Athena SWAN journey because I think it's helpful to contextualize what we've done and how we've got to where we are. And then I'm going to profile two initiatives that we developed. One is Bridging the Gap, which is looking at how do we build up partnership working across a rather complex large university and increase efficiencies. And the second is our COVID-19 career support scheme. So looking at our journey, we are one of the founding members of Athena SWAN. We've been doing this work for a reasonably long time, so since 2005. We've gone through the trials and tribulations of the journey, and we renewed our Silver Institutional Award last year in 2021, and that meant that we had to navigate through the pandemic. But we also believe in the value of Athena SWAN in its bottom-up approach, because actually universities can do things solely at the top level, but actually what we wanted to do was to make sure our departments were committed to this work and were enabled and empowered to take the work forward locally. It's a lot of work, so I'm not going to say it's not, but actually between our 2015 submission and our 2021 submission, we actually increased the number of awards that we have from 23 to 41. So, looking at the first Bridging the Gap project, we actually now have 43 departmental awards, including 3 at Gold, which is reasonably good, I think. But what we also find is that there are many self-assessment teams. And the capacity to take on this work is challenged at some level because we have a lot of duplication. So what we're doing is often repeated. There are similar issues. I'm sure if I went around the room, we'd probably find similar issues around recruitment, access to training, promotions, and what we think is that maybe there's potential for greater impact if we coordinated better. To add to this, our 2021 Institutional Silver submission committed every academic department and professional services area to hold an Athena SWAN Award by 2026. That's a big ask. And then we've got 2 different issues that have come up, which I think for other colleagues in the room they'll identify with. The first is there's been an increased specialization in Athena SWAN work. We need, knowing what needs to be done, how to do it, there's a technique to it at some level. And what we also found is that there's an element of self-assessment team fatigue, membership turnover, and we're losing expertise and knowledge. I've included the link, so you'll hopefully get the slide, so you will be able to actually access our rather long institutional submission and a rather long action plan, which we've made commitments to. But actually, what we wanted to do is then think about how do we bring the local and center to work together effectively. And we identified 5 areas. I'm going to probably not tell anybody how challenging it can be for universities to produce data. And so we had a lot of trouble at the beginning trying to get data, and we still do. It's not an easy thing to do accurately and with confidence. And so we employed data analysts. We have them. I work with them. I manage them. We produce data sets for departments to try and streamline this. University management information systems aren't designed necessarily to produce the data that Athena SWAN or any other agency wants. And actually, we're retrofitting some of these systems to meet our needs. And also, we wanted to produce our data intersectionally. We're 20% minority ethnic at UCL, and we wanted to make sure that we could do this systematically. We also wanted to G up, galvanize, energize our self-assessment teams. It's a lot of work, and so we've worked through networking, Athena Forum, workshops. We've got set up Athena SWAN EDI committees at faculty levels. We developed a SharePoint internally, which we began to try and increase the awareness of information on how to deliver submissions, and we've coordinated governance through our Gender Equality Steering Group, which is chaired by our University Gender Equality Envoy. We also then looked at coordination of local staffing and co-management. I know many universities employ Athena SWAN or EDI specialists locally. However, it can often feel like we don't galvanize or harness the potential for greater systemic impact by coordinating them. So I worked with departments, and my colleagues centrally worked with departments to increase resourcing, but I also provide support locally to those staff members so that we can create what we call a central Athena SWAN team that allows us to share the woes and tribulations of delivering and taking forward Athena SWAN work. And that actually worked quite well because it means that we share expertise, we can identify issues from the bottom up and share them centrally. Additionally, one of the things that I identified when I first came in 2018 was that 8 out of 9 submissions that we made actually didn't get it. And that was causing a lot of resentment. And part of the reason why is that there aren't many opportunities to actually participate in national panels. And if I were to send a team onto a football match and I didn't tell them what the rules of the game were and what a goal looked like, it becomes very difficult. So collectively, we designed a system, and I have a colleague in the room, Eleanor, when we worked together, we refined and developed this internal mock panel system. We trained up volunteers, and we have 95 trained volunteers across UCL that actually support and review departmental submissions twice beforehand. That's fine. And what that's allowed us to do is really increase our success rate. We rarely have a failed submission. And I know for all of us who are encountering the minor revision process, well, yes, we do have minor revisions, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But actually, what we've got is a much more formative approach, rather than a normative or summative approach, to actually looking at Athena SWAN. And that's actually one of the benefits, I would say, of the transformed scheme. And we've linked this all together with a broader EDI engagement activity that's taken place across UCL. So we now have Vice Deans for EDI across the institution, so all 11 of our faculties now have these posts in place. We have got resourcing and FTE allocated to those functions, and we've now been able to take this work, I think, to a better level in terms of effectively delivering success and support for departments. It's work in progress, and the Transformed Athena SWAN is going to be a new way for us to do it. I'm going to move on to the career support, COVID-19 career support scheme. And it's very clear, when the pandemic came, there were lots of issues. And we recognized that there may be certain groups at risk. So we surveyed our staff and we looked at what the data told us. So we took a data-driven approach. As the slide shows, parents, carers, women, those on fixed-term contracts, especially researchers, were most at risk from our data. There's no surprise. So the Gender Equality Envoy and we developed a scheme which we pitched to our management, and we secured £600,000 to look at ways of redressing lost work productivity and risks to longer-term career prospects. So we developed the scheme, CCSS, and we divided it into 3 streams based on the evidence that we had. The first stream is giving back time, which is a grant of around £500. The second is the Equity Bridging Fund, which is funding up to £10,000, and what we affectionately call STRAP, which is the resourcing of up to 40 hours of university temp workers. And we ran the scheme between 2020 and February 21, and the funding had to be spent by July 2021. So we covered the period of the worst lockdown for us. In order to be successful, there had to be very clear criteria, and the criteria is there. 1 in 66 staff applied, and it was successful. So we've actually provided a fair amount of funding. The profile targeted, 45% were research staff, 93% were parents or carers. And that really tells you about the impact of the pandemic and the way that we could address it. 75% were women, or identified as women. Just under a third were Black, Asian, and minoritized ethnic. So it's very clear what we were able to get data on this. We've surveyed, and obviously we've produced some very brief overviews of what people told us. But one of the things was improved mental health was reported and feeling supported by the institution. That's not always an easy thing to get buy-in for. So we're very proud that that actually was something that people fed back to us. And examples of what people did with the money was write papers, grant applications, submit promotion applications, and carry out teaching and administrative tasks. And we all know, working in higher education, the impact that COVID has had, particularly on our students. And so actually enabling the teaching work and activity to be prioritized has been a success. Again, you know, for giving back time, 37 working hours per person. For the Equity Bridging Fund, which is the fund up to £10,000, 39 working days in addition to their contract. So that for us has been very tangible benefits that we're able to record. And again, the final point is that 660 hours of Unitemp support. The message behind this is that actually when you have the evidence and you have the data, what are you going to do with it? And it links back to what Tom was saying yesterday. You know, the question here and the challenge he posed to us, you know, what are you going to do today to make your work culture more inclusive tomorrow? And actually this scheme has enabled us to try and look at doing this, and more importantly has drawn on the expertise that has been piloted beforehand in some of our faculties. And on that note, I want to recognize two faculties in particular, the Faculty of Brain Science and MAPS, which is Mathematics and Physical Sciences, where their EDI vice deans drove forward local initiatives which we used and drew on in developing this initiative. And thank you very much. I'm done.